Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. In case you're unfamiliar, my name is Chelsea Bear and I was born with a disability called cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy can be super different from person to person, but for me specifically it impacts the way I walk, and I use different mobility devices and I share a ton of content on what it's like living with a disability, specifically cerebral palsy. I've gotten a ton of questions from people asking me what my experience was like at college, and I was visiting some friends in Fort Myers over the weekend and I figured while I'm in town I would visit where I went to school. So I'm here at FGCU. As you can see, it's been 10 years since I graduated, so it's very nostalgic and a weird feeling coming back here. The campus has grown so much, but the purpose of this video is to share what it was like for me going away to school with a disability. Going to college was my first time ever leaving my parents' house. When I was 18, after I graduated high school, I came straight to FGCU, which was about 2 hours from where I grew up. It was my first time living on my own. I went into the dorms, and I really just want to kind of share some stories and also let this video serve as a resource for anyone with a disability that's maybe in your teens or thinking about college and thinking about going away to a university to get the full experience. So I'm going to share kind of what my experience was like, some advice, and I'd love to hear from everyone watching as well if you have your own stories you'd like to share with people watching or any advice or resources that you would like to chime in. It would be super helpful because, like I said, I really want this to be a resource for everyone watching and hopefully a little bit of entertainment along the way. So to give a little background about me, I used a walker at school all the way from preschool to elementary school to middle school to high school, but when I went away to college, because the campus was so much bigger than what I was used to, I started using my mobility scooter, which is what I'm on now. And it was a huge transition. I still brought my walker with me, of course, and would use it sometimes, but I really would scoot from the dorms to my classes and all over. I wanted to preface this by saying 10 years ago I was in a much different headspace when it comes to advocating for myself than I am now. When I first came to college, I didn't really know that there were accommodations available, and I also didn't feel that I needed to ask for them. I was still very much in the mind space that I needed to adapt to the world versus the world needed to adapt to me. I always just hoped for the best, so if I was starting the process now of figuring out what school to go to, figuring out what accommodations I need, what works for me, what doesn't, I would probably approach the situation entirely differently than I did back when I was 18 for starting the process. So I hope to share some insight of some things I would do different, some advice as well. I just wanted to give that backstory that I wasn't always as open about my disability or advocating for myself and the things that I needed, so that may translate into some of the fun stories that I share as well, but just wanted to give that background before we jump in. I'm going to share some b-roll of this beautiful campus. It was perfect for me because it's a more intimate campus, class sizes were smaller, it was easy for me to navigate versus one of the larger universities in the state of Florida. So I had a really great experience here. As I said, I was just visiting friends. I've made so many of my lifelong friends from my time here at FGCU. So yeah, I'm going to show you the campus a little bit, tell some stories along the way, and again, I hope that you could share any of your own experiences at your own university or resources in the comments. I'll pan the camera around and show you, but right now this is kind of like the main courtyard. There's tons of events they used to do here, and there's paved sidewalks, but there's also grass, and for the event sometimes some of the booths and stuff would be in the middle of the grass, and I would take scoots and try to go to it. It looks like now they have fake grass down, but when I was here the grass was really thick and high and I would get stuck a couple times. Finally I learned my lesson, but I would literally have my scooter in the middle of the field and be kind of stranded, and I would have to ask like random guys to come and help lift my scooter back to the sidewalk, and then I'd kind of lean on someone else to get back to my scooter. So a lot of learning lessons that I had while I was here. You know, that was definitely one of them. Okay, I truly didn't think I would get emotional during this visit, but I kind of am. So I just did a portion of the scoot route I used to take my freshman year of college, and I lived on campus the first 2 years, so I'll get into that a little bit more. But they do offer shuttles to take you from the dorms to the main area where the classes were, but for some reason I just never wanted to be on a shuttle. I'm pretty sure they were accessible, but I just thought it was easier for me to just scoot. So it probably took me around 20 minutes depending on what building my classes were in. And you know, I wasn't the most responsible back then at 18, so I wouldn't always remember to charge my scooter. So I remember sometimes that I would be going literally turtle speed to get back to my dorm. Also, we're in Florida, so I would have to deal with the rain a lot, and I would just get soaking wet. For Christmas one year, one of my grandparents got me an umbrella because I just was jokingly like telling them about how I would get soaked going from classes to my dorm and vice versa, and then finally, I don't know why I didn't have the common sense to buy one myself, but falling on a college budget. But yeah, it was really nostalgic, and when I used to go turtle speed, I used to literally play Go the Distance from the Hercules soundtrack to kind of like fuel me to keep going and to get Scoots to keep going, which of course was out of my control. No matter how much I hyped it up, if I didn't charge it, it wasn't gonna go. I never got like super stuck, but that should have been one of my first lessons of always keeping my charger with me, which I still didn't really learn until the past couple of years. So now I'll talk about what my experience was like with on-campus housing, especially my first time coming here, leaving home, finding a roommate. A lot of people were asking me about what that was like. So it's been a very long time since I went through the process of applying for on-campus housing, so I can't specifically get into the details about that, and I know it's different from university to university, so it really doesn't matter anyway. But I will say that what I was experiencing when it came to finding a roommate, I did random selection because I didn't know anyone else coming here, and I was really nervous. I kind of compare it now to how I feel going on first dates, kind of like that weight of wanting to tell the other person that I have a disability but not wanting them to treat me differently because of it. So that was how I was feeling in terms of roommates. FGCU itself is a newer campus, so a lot of the dorm buildings were built in the time where ADA was required, so I really didn't have any fears or anxieties about living on campus because the buildings were so new. So the way the freshman dorms were set up when I went, it was just me and a roommate. We both had our own separate rooms, like a door for our bed, but we did have to share a bathroom that was kind of split in two. So one half of the bathroom had a sink and a toilet, and the other half of the bathroom had a sink and a shower. So that was nice because we both had access to the bathroom without, you know, having to kick the other one out. We just had to coordinate who was showering when and then who was using the toilet when. So that was really helpful. And then in terms of a random roommate, I lucked out. I had the most incredible first roommate. We still keep in touch today. She actually was from the same area as me initially, but we had never met, so we had a lot in common. I was a very shy and quiet person back then, but she was so inclusive to hang out with me and always invited me to meet up with her friends and stuff like that, so I really lucked out with that. I actually did message my freshman roommate before we met each other for the first time to let her know that I had my disability. She was super receptive and really didn't even care at all. She didn't really have too many questions and stuff like that, but I just felt for myself I'd feel better sharing it with her before I met her to kind of reduce any anxieties I had about the what ifs. Thankfully she was super receptive. We had a great simple conversation about it and kind of moved forward as if it was not an issue, because it's not, but definitely whenever you're kind of hesitating or wondering if you should bring it up to give someone the heads up beforehand, I always feel better doing it before the fact, just to kind of, like I said, alleviate that stress, and it's kind of like a weight off your shoulders, so when you're meeting the person it's not kind of like this big scary thing. You can just get into knowing each other. So I'm very thankful that my freshman year roommate, while she was a random selection, you know, it ended up working out in the best way possible. I don't have any issues. You know, I do have other friends that are disabled that have come to FGCU, and they said they worked with the Adaptive Services office before they got here to work through any accommodations they may need in the specific dorm. Some of those would be they got automatic door openers installed, maybe adaptations to the bathroom area or something like that. I personally didn't need them, so I made do just with kind of what the standard dorm offering was, but that is an option for your university to look into adaptive services or different accommodations that can be available. It's really just kind of doing your research beforehand, and while you are selecting a university, I think that's really important to do, is just keep those things in mind of what is available. And you know, the adaptive services team here 10 plus years ago when I first came was really helpful, but I didn't really utilize them to the best of my ability because I didn't want people to go out of their way to do things for me, but of course in hindsight it would have made my life a little bit easier for certain things. And I personally loved living on campus. It made things so convenient for me. I did have a car here, but I didn't really need it unless I was going off campus to, you know, go to a party, run errands and stuff like that. So my second year here I lived in another area which is more of like sophomore, juniors, even seniors lived on campus, and it was more apartment style. So these buildings did not have elevators, so I had to make sure that I was on the first floor. So that is something that I had to work with the Adaptive Services office. You know, once you kind of figure out who you want to live with, there's a lottery and a whole process that goes into that. So I did have to work closely with them once the lottery became available for me and my friends and roommates at the time to put in for what area of the kind of apartment style complex we wanted to be in. We needed to make sure we were on the first floor because otherwise I wouldn't be able to live there. So that was one thing that was important for me to advocate for, and it ended up working out. And I did want to also touch on laundry in these situations. So for the freshman dorms, I did have an experience experience one time where the laundry I think was like on the third or fourth floor, and I was living on the first floor. Same reason, the buildings for the freshmen are bigger than the apartment style dorms, so they did have elevators, but just in case of an emergency, I never wanted to be stranded on a floor where the elevators closed down. But of course, one time I was doing laundry on the third or fourth floor. I remember I only went up there, I didn't even put shoes on because I was on my scooter. I'm like, oh, my feet aren't even touching the ground. I wore socks, and of course while I'm up there the fire alarm goes off, and I ended up having to leave Scoots and walk down like 3 or 4 flights of stairs in just my socks and evacuate the building. So highly would not recommend that. That was the only kind of negative experience I had in terms of living on campus in the freshman dorms. And then in the apartment style dorms, there was a bunch of laundry buildings scattered throughout, but they were all on the first level and really easy to use. So no issues there either. But yeah, it was my very first time living on my own, so it was a learning process for me as well as my roommates, which I'm still in touch with all of them now and still some of my best friends. But we used to joke a lot because when I was in the apartment style building, we all had our own room, but we did share kind of like a small living space with a couch, TV, and a full kitchen. 2 toilets, 2 showers, and then 2 sinks for us to share amongst the 4 of us. And I remember one time I heard 2 of my roommates outside of my door, I don't think they knew I was home, and they were talking about doing chores and stuff like that, and they were just like, we don't know like what Chelsea can do, what we can't do, we want her to contribute but we don't know how to bring it up. Eventually we ended up all having a conversation, and I'm like, hey guys, like I want to equally contribute as everyone else, like I appreciate your concerns, but I also would appreciate if we just talked about it together. So maybe me going to the dumpster really far away is hard, but I can pick up washing the dishes and stuff like that. And we eventually came up with a really good system, and I learned more about myself and also my communication skills with friends and who I was living with at the time. But it was just kind of all a learning experience as I went. But overall, really positive. I was in those dorms. I did scoot around a lot too. I didn't use the shuttles. So yeah, this campus is really accessible. I really did not have any issues. I think the only thing would be kind of like parking. When I did live off campus, I didn't have a lift on my car at the time, so I would have to just ask random strangers in the parking lot every day when I came to campus to help me get my scooter out because it was too heavy, and I also didn't know my scooter came apart at the time. But when I lived on campus, I really didn't have any issues. There's tons of dining options and stuff like that, so it was really convenient, everything being just kind of like a scoot away and not having to deal with transportation and stuff like that. Okay, I have to tell one of my all-time high favorite Scoot stories before I head home, before I leave campus, but it's getting late and I need to start the drive back to Tampa. I didn't get to make it over to where the North Lake Village is, and that's where the apartment style dorms are that are a little bit more elevated than the freshman dorms. So same thing, when I was in North Lake, I would scoot to class, and there's this walkway right here, and hearing it immediately brings me back to when I'd be scooting from class or vice versa back to the dorm, and it is an audible crosswalk where it will say, wait, and then count down 30 seconds until the light changes where it's safe for you to cross the street. Regardless, I would go down this path. There's a beautiful boardwalk I would cross to get to my dorm, and then there was kind of like a stretch of parking lot to get from the boardwalk to where my dorm was. And I remember this one time specifically, for some reason, I felt like it was a good idea, instead of going around the parking lot, cut through this little like grassy knoll. And I remember 2 of my roommates saw me, and they were standing outside just like waiting for me to get over to them, and watched this whole thing happen where I cut through the grass. But little did I know was that the grass was so high that there was a huge dip, a little bit of a ditch, so I flipped over on my scooter in the grass. But mind you, while this was happening, a FGCU shuttle was dropping off a busload of students, and there was 2 police officers just so happened to be driving by as well. So I essentially got swarmed. Police officers came over to see if I was okay, help me up. A bunch of students, you know, my peers were there, watched the whole thing happen, and my roommates were just cracking up. I was totally fine. I was not injured. It's just one of those things that happens to me that is totally my fault and could have been prevented if I would have gone the regular way. But that was something that has stayed with me. Whenever people ask me if I've ever flipped over on scoots, that is definitely the top story that I always think of, because it was totally, completely my fault. And yeah, I flipped over, I got up, I was so embarrassed. Everyone was super nice and helpful, of course. And then I went over to my friends and we just like kind of laughed about it and I brushed it off. But yeah, every time that I think about that story, I just have been wanting to tell it. So if you ever feel like you should take a shortcut through a patch of grass, maybe think twice, because there can be a ditch there that will make you flip over. But yeah, I didn't get to go over there, but that's where they have kind of like a man-made beach, which was really nice. I used to go lay out there and go tanning. They have different water sports. That's where the gym is, all the intramurals and stuff like that, which I actually used to play. I used to play dodgeball with some of my friends, which I can't imagine how that worked out. I think a lot of people on the opposing team were always scared to throw the ball at me. But yeah, I did it and it was fun. Just wanted to share that story before I head out. Hey everyone, sorry to end this video abruptly, but I realized I took so much footage while I was touring the campus and visiting that I wanted to make this a multiple part series. So make sure you come back for the next video where I'll be sharing more about what it was like getting accommodations for my classes, as well as my social life and more. And as always, thank you for watching and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.